Well, ladies and gentlemen, in our last video, we talked about how Ben Franklin is going to be a man of the Enlightenment. And in this particular video, we're going to talk about what the Enlightenment is all about. So this is Unit 3, British American Colonial Life, and we're looking at sections 5 and 6. That's sections 5 and 6. And so we're taking this idea of Ben Franklin being a man of an enlightenment, someone who is doing research into things and finding out the why of electricity and the how, rather than just saying, yes, it is, and it's what it is. So he is going to be a man of the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment, the easiest way to say this is it's a European intellectual movement. So what does that mean, really? Well, first of all, it starts in Europe. And an intellectual movement is a way of thinking. It's a way of processing information. Rather than just taking someone's word for it, you're going to investigate the who, what, when, where's, and whys and hows of how things work and how they behave. And so the Enlightenment, think about the word itself, enlightenment. The light bulb goes on, right? And so this is saying that people are investigating and learning so much more than they ever have before. And there's some couple of key concepts that the Enlightenment really produced. Excuse me. First of all, this idea of liberty. And every Enlightenment philosopher or thinker kind of defined this a little bit differently. But in fact, it's all about freedom. And you have the freedom to do what you are supposed to do and not be told by someone else what is going on. And the other key concept is that of equality, that everyone is equal. Now, wait a minute. Not everyone is equal in the Enlightenment. What I mean to say basically is white men. Does not include women too much, although some Enlightenment thinkers will push for women to be included. Definitely does not include people who are not European. So it's very racist. It's very sexist. But it's the idea that men are equal. This idea of human dignity and happiness was something that these people thought everyone was kind of entitled to. You were entitled to having a certain expectation of nobility for yourself, of being able to not be made fun of by someone else or doing things that were clearly beneath you. And being happy while doing that, certainly. They emphasize science and reason. So it's not just about, let's take the word of someone for this, but let's investigate it. This is where the scientific method really arose. And so they're really investigating scientifically a lot of different things, not just chemicals or weather or whatever, but many different things. They're applying this method of questioning and proving to figure out what's going on. Here's a real big one, and we've talked about this in our previous units as well, but they come up with this idea of representative government. They think this is a really major key to maintaining peace. We're not talking about democracy where everyone is entitled to help make the government. What we're talking about is male property owners only get to help make the law. And so they kind of feel like these 5 or so key concepts are kind of the basic rights that were important to solving all of mankind's problems. So one of the impacts that the Enlightenment has is on the wealthy and the very well educated. Remember, back in Europe, not a lot of people outside the wealthy could read at all. And so they're going to be the wealthy, the well-educated who are going to read these ideas and be heavily influenced by them. So people like Ben Franklin, who was wealthy enough to afford his own education. And he's going to do a lot of investigating on his own into the Enlightenment and to these philosophers. And a philosopher that was hugely impactful on the American colonies was a gentleman by the name of John Locke. Locke, John Locke. And John Locke, among many other things, came up with 3 real basic rights that he believed all men were entitled to, and that they could not be denied these basic rights. And among those rights were the idea of life, liberty, and property. He said these three rights cannot be taken away from men. They are entitled to them. They are absolute rights that they're entitled to. And so he believes that if a government wasn't protecting these particular rights, then the people had an obligation or the right to change the government so that it did protect those rights. Now, think about what I just said. And there's our friend John Locke, by the way. Life, liberty, and property are basic rights that all humans are entitled to, all men are entitled to under John Locke's ideas. And that if they are not protected by the government, the people can change the government. So this is much, much before where we're talking about, but it's still going to have a big impact on the way American people are going to think in the colonies. And if you think about it, is this not the Declaration of Independence? And America proclaiming its independence from England because England did not protect these rights. And so that's a spoiler alert right there. This is a huge key to understanding what's going to happen in the American Revolution coming up. By the way, that's Unit 4, our next unit. So John Locke, three big concepts: life, liberty, and property. And if the government's not meeting those basic rights, change the government is a right of the people. So Locke is going to be hugely impactful on the American Revolution. So that's something to note right there. Now, another big movement at the time was the Great Awakening, and where the Enlightenment was all about thinking your way through things and investigating. The Enlightenment was about religion, and it was about making religion personal and emotional to the followers, to everyone impacted. The preachers of the Great Awakening were really magnificent speakers. They would preach these huge outdoor sermons to hundreds or thousands of people. George Whitefield was the most influential minister of the time, and it was said that his voice could project something like 3 city blocks. So you're talking several hundred yards. So no microphones, no amplifiers. Obviously, this is long before all that. But his voice would carry to these people. And he basically preached that everyone was in charge of their own salvation. You didn't need a church father or a special blessing or an elaborate ritual to be saved. And he wanted to get in contact with everyone. And when I say everyone, if you look at that picture, we do mean everyone. In that picture, if you look closely, there are men, there are women, there are children, they're African, they're white. So he's talking to everyone here, is that everyone is entitled to their salvation. So who is this going to impact the most? Well, the Enlightenment, if you remember, it was all about the wealthy and the educated. The Great Awakening is going to be the masses of common people, not just the wealthy, not just the educated, but even the illiterate, poor, backwoods, country bumpkin is going to be touched by this idea of the Great Awakening, that they can be saved and that they are in charge of their own salvation. And religion is going to be a very personal thing to them. There's Whitefield, a little bit more about him. It's actually going to cause the disruption of several denominations. So like the Methodists and the Baptists are going to become very big at this time. And it's going to create competition in the colonies for religion to be connected to the people. Many people who had lost interest or out of touch with their religion are going to come back to it because they get inspired by ministers like Whitefield, among others. Many people are going to go out and work among the natives and slaves, converting them to various denominations of Christianity. And again, I want to emphasize women more than ever before are going to have a deeper connection to the religion, and they are going to be in charge of their religion. And to them, that's very important. And the big key concept here is that it illustrated that things can change. If there's a resistance to established authority, so we're going to go against the church preachings, these ministers are going to say, you are in charge. It's up to you, the individual, who can make the change. Now, again, a little preview of what's to come. What's the revolution about? Is it started by a bunch of wealthy people? No, it's started by a bunch of backwoodsmen, by people who could barely read. Masses of people started the revolution. Now, later on, the wealthy and the educated get involved and write the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence and all that. But originally, it's just the common everyday person resisting what's going on, saying, this has to stop, this has to change. I'm in charge, not you. And so together, the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening, one an intellectual movement, the Enlightenment, one a religious movement, the Great Awakening, is going to help plant the seeds for the American Revolution that is to come. So at this point, we've talked about sections 5 and 6 now of Unit 3, the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening. So hopefully you figured out kind of what's important here. The red circle should definitely give you a good idea. And if you have any questions, be sure to ask or send me a comment. Otherwise, everyone, have a good evening.